This is the podcast overview for the objectives on Chapter 11, Self-Regulation, Physical Activity, and Exercise. So the first part that you want to be familiar with is what the ACSM, which is the American College of Sports Medicine, has as its guidelines for physical activity. How does it define physical activity? What category is that in, and what does that look like for the average adult? So you're going to get familiar with a little bit of the statistics there in the beginning, and then differentiate between what is meant by physical activity, physical exercise, and then physical fitness. How are these all interrelated, and how are they different? And so the book has several charts, especially in the very beginning of the chapter, tables that list activity levels from inactive to high. It has examples of different activities that are moderate intensity and vigorous intensity. Those you'll want to get familiar with, kind of what items are where, what's considered moderate intensity physical activity, and what would be vigorous. And then what are the key guidelines for adults? Like, how much activity should adults be getting each week? After you've established that, we'll look at what is represented by what's called the FIT principle. We'll take a look at everything that it involves, which is frequency, intensity, time, and then type of physical activity. So I think those charts will help. The tables in the beginning of the chapter are going to help, but it gets more specific into aerobic activity, anaerobic activity, cardiorespiratory, fitness, and then what the NIH, National Institute of Health, panel recommends in terms of those activities that are good, the benefits of specifically aerobic activity and exercise. So we'll be looking at that. Be familiar with Table 11.4, which outlines the various types of health risks and their minimum recommended dosage of moderate activity. This chart is a little intensive. You don't need to know all the data and the numbers, but I just kind of want you to look at it and get an overall sense of what kinds of things are we at risk for, right? Cardiovascular disease, stroke, hypertension, cancers, diabetes, osteoporosis. Those are the big ones. And why are we at risk for those? And how can we reduce our risk based on our levels of activity? Okay. Then you're going to want to understand the variations in types of exercises and their associated benefits to the overall reduction in disease risk for those specific categories of diseases. You'll want to be able to explain the difference between subcutaneous fat and visceral fat, and what are the resulting risk factors of each. These are different ways that we store fat on our body. What is good, what is bad, and what puts us at risk. Be able to outline the well-being benefits of physical activity in general. And then we get into a little bit of a psychosocial element here, and that is the role of expectancy effects and placebo effects in the use of physical exercise, along with psychotherapeutic techniques for improved well-being and treatment for psychological illnesses like anxiety and depression. So how are people using physical exercise to combat psychological illnesses like anxiety and depression? That's the crux of it. We've gotten creative. I mean, most of the time, people who have anxiety and depression are on medication. They may be seeking out therapy. So there are specific guidelines for that, but exercise can be a really great addition to their already their therapeutic plan that's already in progress. But one's expectancies, what I expect to get out of that, can affect what I do get out of it. And there's a lot of placebo effects. So you want to read up about how that can definitely play a role overall. Okay, then you want to be familiar with the therapeutic effects of endorphins and monoamines. Know what those are, first of all, and which are being released during regular exercise and the benefits of that. Outline the various hypotheses. There's psychological and social interaction hypotheses that support the benefits of exercise to one's overall well-being, and then as well the cognitive benefits. So there's psychological benefits, there's social interaction benefits, and then there's cognitive benefits of physical exercise. I'd like you also to understand how the Physical Activity Readiness Questionnaire, the PARCQ, is used as a screening tool to determine one's readiness to begin an exercise regimen. So this is huge because one's readiness is often going to determine their success. How motivated is one to start an exercise regimen, a plan, and stick with it? And so this is a big one for physicians and anybody working with patients who have to change their physical activity level. Maybe they've had a heart attack or they've, had some illness where exercise is necessary and needed to lose weight. And so this can often help gauge whether or not someone is ready to do that, and also what barriers might stand in the way of someone being successful at doing that. Next, outline the methods of measuring steps taken and heart rate. So here's where we get into a lot of the pedometry sorts of statistics, and how do we calculate our steps, and what does that look like, and what are goal steps taken. If one's wanting to reduce heart rate, what would that look like? And all of that. The recommendations for beginning an exercise program. What would doctors recommend if somebody were to start an exercise regimen? What should that look like? As well as maintenance of an exercise program. It's one thing to start. Starting sometimes is the easiest part, but maintaining a good exercise regimen is difficult. That initial enthusiasm can wane, or the person might see that it's not attainable and give up. So there tends to be some high dropout rates anytime exercise is a requirement to a regimen. So if someone is maybe going on medication, also told to go on a diet and exercise, right? Those are the three biggies behind most of our illnesses today: hypertension, diabetes, obesity. They might be given those instructions, but it's really tough for patients to do all of that. And they might have, relapses, and they might have periods of inactivity, which can thwart their effects and thwart their successes. And so they might stop trying. So what are some, different bullet points, I think, are in the chapter of maintaining a good exercise program. And then lastly, something that the text talks about is eustress and flow and its relation to physical activity. This is concepts that we talked about in chapter 1 and chapter 2. Chapter 1, we went over eustress, and chapter 2, we went over flow and feeling in the zone, quote unquote. And so how does that connected to engaging in physical activity? What is that associated with? And that will wrap up your objectives for chapter 11.